So on the heels of talking about USC's offensive line, let's go deeper into this conversation, because I don't know if you're aware, Adam, and I don't know if you're aware of people who are watching here at the Voice of College Football tonight on a Tuesday. Michigan and Sharon Moore, they suck. And USC lost to that Michigan team. Michigan scored just 7 points against Illinois. Michigan's bad. And so like that reflects poorly on USC, that USC wasn't able to beat this Michigan team. But that point aside, Sharon Moore just landed a 5-star offensive tackle. All right. So Michigan is, having a terrible season, but is able to land a 5-star offensive tackle. Where is that at USC, right? If Michigan can be circling the drain, not as a program overall, but I'm talking in 2024, and yet can land a 5-star offensive tackle in the midst of all this, and right after playing a terrible game on national TV against Illinois. If Michigan can do that, why can't USC do that? And, Sharon Moore, he doesn't have, the credentials Lincoln Riley does. And yet USC continues to not get 5-star offensive tackles. So, Adam, I know that I'm going to tee this one up for you. Jen Cohen, right? We're back into that Jen Cohen territory. That Jen Cohen needs to have a very serious sit down with Lincoln Riley right now. Like they need to hash things out. They need to get on the same page, because it doesn't seem that they are. I forget, there's some college football insider, I forget who, but one of like the big outlets, CBS, ESPN, somewhere, said that Jen Cohen doesn't know how to kind of relate to Lincoln Riley. Again, not sure which one said that, but one of the insiders said it. It actually might have been Dan Wolken of USA Today. Again, I'm not sure which one, but one of the big insiders who covers the sport said that Jen Cohen is struggling to figure out how to connect with Lincoln Riley. Well, that has to happen right now. That should be happening right now. And they need to not only be on the same page, but they need to have a Josh Henson conversation. Like, Josh, what is your plan to land 5-star offensive tackles? Michigan's out here doing this, even though Michigan is stepping on a rake left and right. Okay. How do we raise our game in recruiting? How do we raise our game in the portal so that we don't get caught shorthanded as we were this season? Like, these conversations need to be happening right now. So Adam, as a Jen Cohen critic, and also as, someone who has been pretty accurate in your skepticism of Lincoln Riley, what do you make of all this? What other details should we be paying attention to here at USC?
Well, you raised a lot of great points, and I'll just give just a few responses to several of them. Number one, the reason that I think Riley is difficult to relate to, and I don't know him, I suspect he has a very, very big ego. And I suspect he thinks he knows more than most. And that makes it difficult to interact with him. Number two, why did we hire Jen Cohen? If you look at her background as an athletic director, she was a successful athletic director at the University of Washington for a few years. So what? University of Washington is not USC. And I was not convinced that she had the experience to lead as the athletic director. And that has been borne out by my third reason, which is a lackluster NIL. You want to get 5-star recruits? Here's what you do. You find out how much money they're getting from another program, and you double it. And you pay them more than they will be paid at any other college. And the second thing you do is you develop them so that you can tell people, when you come to USC, you not only make the most money, but you go to the NFL. And we're not doing any of those things. And, third, what I'll say is I went to USC from 1993 and graduated in 97. And what I've noticed is that USC goes through these patches of mediocrity throughout its history, where it's dominant for several years and then is mediocre for several years. We saw that in the 90s when we saw that with John Robinson when I was there, and we lost all 4 years to UCLA and to Notre Dame. We saw that in the early 2000s. Then we were dominant again, and then we go into this 10 to 12-year stretch of mediocrity. Well, now we're at a crossroads, where what does it take to win? It takes a great head coach. It takes a lot of money. It takes great development, and it takes a proven record of success where you can tell kids you're going to be set for life by coming to USC, and you're going to have the best coaches in the world to develop you and put you in the NFL so that you can have a great life. We are not doing anything on the recruitment, development, placement front, and most importantly, we're not winning games. So what are the incentives for those 5-stars to come here? They're not. That's why you see people from modern day going out of state. That's why you see Bryce Young going to Alabama. And until we fix these things, USC will continue in this patch of mediocrity. Now, as far as Gen Con goes, how could you not know this? This is common sense. You have to buy players in this era. You have to attract players by appealing to their self-interest. And it's A, I want to play in the NFL, and B, I want to make enough money so I can support my family. We're not doing those things, and yet we expect to win when we have a coach who seems scared and a defensive coordinator who, quite frankly, is probably going to leave because he's probably already had enough of what's going on here. So what we need is a systemic change at USC. If we're going to get the players, we need to have the people who are going to create a program that is going to lead us to success. We don't have that right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating to contemplate what's happening right now, not just from a USC standpoint, but one of the really weird aspects of USC's struggles under Lincoln Riley is that while USC is having a very difficult 2-year period, 2023 and 2024, it's not as though Oklahoma is doing any better. Oklahoma's a mess. It's interesting. Oklahoma just fired its offensive coordinator in the middle of the season. Like that, that was like Lincoln Riley firing Alex Grinch two weeks before the end of the season last year. And it's hilarious, not in like a ha that's funny. It's in a strange way. Like no one at USC, no one at Oklahoma, all right, 3 years ago in November of 2021, no one was predicting that both teams would be not very good right now. Like you would think one team would be better than the other. Like one team would have come out ahead in the exchange, but no, they're both bad. Both Lincoln Riley and Brent Venables are really struggling and it's eerie. The similarities are eerie in that Lincoln Riley just hijacked his USC tenure by doubling down on Alex Grinch last year. And Brent Venables, his defense is good. Like that defense has played well this season. They lost 34-3 to Texas, but that's with the offense doing zip, nothing. Like the offense couldn't stay on the field for like 10 minutes. Like Texas had the ball the whole game. A bad defense would have given up 60. So OU did really well to allow only 34. But that offense is so bad. And I saw a stat over the weekend that Oklahoma's offensive rating is like 6 or 7 points lower than Lincoln Riley's Alex Grinch defense was rated. So like if you thought Lincoln Riley's Alex Grinch defense was bad, the Oklahoma offense is several orders of magnitude worse in terms of overall rating. So it's really fascinating that Oklahoma is in just as bad a position as USC. Like no one predicted that, Adam. No one predicted that in November of 2021 when Lincoln Riley was hired at USC. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, and sometimes people think that individuals who are in positions of great power necessarily have great judgment. Well, as far as the Sooners go, it's ironic how they have given themselves precisely the opposite problem that they had when Lincoln Riley was the coach. Riley was all offense. OU has no defense. So what does Oklahoma do? They get a coach that's all defense and no offense, as we saw in that 25-15 loss to Tennessee. So you have to have balance. And again, I go back to what Woody Hayes said. He said, you win with people. And one of the things that you have to do to win and get those people is not just throw money at people, not just have a great developmental program, not just place people in the NFL. You have got to identify those recruits who have the intangibles, the ones who are great under pressure, the ones who can make the great throw, okay, with seconds left on a 4th and 6. And the ones who can work well with their teammates, who have leadership, perseverance, hunger, and that killer instinct. So putting together a championship team is about putting in the resources to get those players, but then identifying which of those players is going to really create a true team. That's what Michigan did, and that's why Michigan won it last year. Right now, what I'm seeing from USC is we don't have the people, we don't have the personnel, we don't have the policies. What we really have is a broken program, and that's why we're 3-4 when we should at the very least be 6-1.
Want to get to a super chat here. DJ, thanks for the $10 super chat. Line play is and has been bad for a very long time. We all get giddy with the athlete that runs a 4.3. Give me great line play every day of the week. So couldn't agree with you more. And here's something to kind of drill deeper into with this offensive line issue, DJ, in light of your super chat. And obviously I'll put this to you, Adam, as well. When you think about the offensive line, there have been like 20-minute chunks, 20-minute sequences in games when this offensive line's been great. You think about the third quarter against Wisconsin, that was excellent. The second quarter against Penn State when USC built the 20-6 lead. The third quarter at Michigan when USC got back into the game and rallied. The third quarter against Minnesota, the 12-play, 91-yard, 7-minute drive, one of the best drives of the season. Like, we've seen this line play well, but it plays well for about 30 to 35 minutes. And that is the thing I keep coming back to with this team. Forget about 60 minutes, all right? It's my dream for USC to play a complete 60-minute game. But, other than, I think, maybe LSU kind of got close to that. But other than LSU, can USC at least play 45 good minutes? Can the offensive line at least play 3 good quarters? I'd love 4, but let's just get 3. And for the most part, this offensive line is good for only 2 quarters. Pretty much 2 quarters. And one thing before I let you in, Adam, one other thing about this offensive line. In the high leverage possessions, 5 minutes left against Michigan, the fourth quarter against Minnesota, overtime against Penn State, and the end of the game against Maryland. Like, the possessions, when the game has been squarely on the line, the offensive line has been blown away by the opposing defensive front. So, you can play 30 to 35 good minutes in a game, but if you're not rising on the deciding possessions of a game, what kind of an offensive line are you? That's when you reveal what kind of a football team you are. And that's when you reveal, as an offensive line unit, what kind of group you are. You get the toughest yards. You get the biggest first downs. You get the most important points. And USC keeps whiffing in those situations. And that's why the offensive line, to me, remains the center of this whole problem at USC.
I agree with you. So a lot of people say, football has changed so much in the past 50 years with spread offenses and the like. Well, at the end of the day, there's still something very basic about college football. The teams that win in the trenches, okay? They win in the trenches. They're more physical. Look at Michigan last year. Look at the Alabama teams that won national championships in 2017, 2020. Old school football still wins games. And yes, USC's offensive line has played well at times, but if you're going to be a national title contender, you have to play well all of the time. You have to look at every play as a life unto itself, and you have to win that play and win it for 60 minutes. If you're going to be inconsistent, then your results are going to be inconsistent, and that's why we're 3-4, and that's why last year we were 8-5 after the Louisville win, and why our record for the last 10 years has been mediocre. Now, I saw someone in the comment box say that I was way off about Jen Cohen. Okay, well, produce facts for me that suggest that Jen Cohen was the right choice and is doing the right things. We're 3-4. We've had NIL struggles. We entered a Big Ten that is going to be very problematic for us. And in fact, there's already been rumors that the travel is actually exhausting some of the players. So you tell me what vision Jen Cohen has that is going to change what has already been problematic during her tenure. And if you present facts, I will have an open mind and change my opinion. Until then, Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen are not the answer for USC.
You know what? You mentioned the travel, and I got to say this. USC should be getting into those East Coast Big Ten locations as early as possible. And I think, most people in the industry would agree you should be getting in there Thursday instead of Friday. USC should try getting in on a Wednesday. Just make camp out there so that you get a couple sleeps on your hotel bed in College Park, Piscataway, Happy Valley, whatever. Like USC should be moving the needle earlier in the week. And that's definitely under the discretion of the athletic director. Athletic director can help schedule when you're flying in. I mean, I know that Lincoln Riley has his own view, but that is certainly I think that's something that an athletic director can intervene in, because she's managing the athletic department. Fork over the extra hotel night bill, right? To make sure that those players are fresh and rested, they're adjusted, they're acclimatized. That seems to me to be something that Jen Cohen can do. And if people are going to bellyache about the extra night of hotel costs, hey, that's why you got that Big Ten money, right? That is what the Big Ten television money is for. You need to be dipping into that and making sure that your football team is ready to win games on the road in the Big Ten Conference. So definitely wanted to get to that. Now, Gary from Dana Point. We have to answer our questions raised by Gary from Dana Point, because we love Gary. We care about you, Gary. So Gary, Matt, where do we go from here? Well, I think for Gary and for everyone else here at the Voice of College Football on the USC channel, I think one of the big picture lessons and takeaways from this season is, if you don't have Caleb Williams, if you don't have Kyler Murray, if you don't have Baker Mayfield, you better have the best damn offensive line on the planet, right? And that's one of the big epiphanies about Lincoln Riley. It's that if you don't have the Superman quarterback that he has regularly had, Baker, Kyler, also Jalen Hurts as well, didn't mean to exclude him, Caleb Williams, if you don't have that Superman level quarterback who can cover for the limitations of an offensive line by making amazing improvisational plays, if you do not have that kind of quarterback, your line has to be elite. And that's where Lincoln Riley did not think things through, and he didn't make the moves necessary to give USC the best possible chance to succeed this year. This is not to bag on Miller Moss at all either. I was very consistent throughout the offseason in saying this. Miller's going to need help, right? Because he can't do everything by himself the way Caleb Williams did in 2022, when he makes the Notre Dame defense look silly in the USC game at the Coliseum. Not last year in South Bend, but the game in the Coliseum in 2022, which pretty much nailed down the Heisman Trophy. He just made a very good Notre Dame defensive line look silly. And Miller Moss can't do that. But that's not a criticism of Miller Moss. It's that Miller Moss is not a number one overall NFL draft pick. That's not a criticism. It just means you're not at that level of skill. And so Miller Moss was going to need this offensive line to be really good. And I was out there and saying that. He's going to need this offensive line to help him. He has not gotten that help. And people want Jaden Mayava to be in as the starting quarterback. This is not a quarterback issue. Now, did Miller Moss throw a really bad interception against Maryland? Of course he did. But the offensive line, as I've outlined, whenever the game has been right there on the doorstep of being won, the offensive line has faltered. And so Lincoln Riley, in terms of team building, in terms of roster construction, he needs to realize, hey, at Oklahoma, I had Superman quarterbacks. So I didn't have to have the absolute best bone-crushing offensive line in the world. I needed a good line, but I had a quarterback who could make plays to transcend other positional limitations on my offense. Miller Moss is just not that guy. And again, that's not a criticism. We knew that. We knew that Miller Moss isn't going to be the guy who just takes off and runs for 40 yards. We knew that Miller Moss can't be Houdini in the pocket and he's going to have that eye in the back of his head the way Caleb Williams did. So Gary from Dana Point and everyone, again, here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football, where do we go from here depends on Lincoln Riley making sure that, all right, you'd love to have the perfect quarterback and the perfect offensive line. Okay, that's the dream. But in terms of being realistic, if you don't have the Superman quarterback, you need the supreme offensive line to help the game manager type quarterback, such as Miller Moss, be in a position to succeed. And that goes back to Jen Cohen needing to talk to Lincoln Riley about Josh Henson and mapping out a real plan for landing 5-star big fish linemen on the trail and paying for elite premium offensive tackles in the portal so that, if we don't have the Superman quarterback, we're going to have the best possible offensive line. So Gary from Dana Point, that's where we need to go from here. Let's see if the power brokers at USC and Lincoln Riley can actually implement that kind of plan, that kind of vision for the program, because that is the lesson that we should be learning from this season at USC.
I totally agree. And Gary from Dana Point, always a great caller. I just want to respond quickly. Trojan Blade, who I have a lot of respect for, in response to your comments, I'm not slandering anyone. I'm giving an opinion. I'm giving an opinion that Lincoln Riley is not the right person for the job. And I am raising questions about Jen Cohen's fit for this job. And I specifically said, if there's facts that you want to provide that will convince me otherwise, that's fine. But that's what all of this is. It's not like I'm trying to slander somebody. But I look at the results on the field. I look at the issues we had with NIL. I look at the fact that we're not getting top recruits and that we're sitting here 3-4 with a coaching staff, yes, that she approved, which is one of the most expensive in the country. But are they good? Are they good? I think you would get reasonable people to disagree on that. So I'm not slandering anyone. What I tend to think is this. When you ask where we go from here, I'm not saying that we should win the national championship this year or even go to the playoff. I have said for months, I think 8-4 would be good if it shows an upward trajectory and it signals consistent improvement, because we are in a rebuilding phase at this juncture. But what I'm seeing from the first 7 games is that we really haven't progressed much, and in fact may have regressed. And that's why I'm raising these questions. And it might not be popular to raise them, but it certainly isn't popular to stick with the status quo. So what is good enough for me? For me, it's 8-4 this year, in which we win all but one of our all of our remaining games. That would be great. But what's looking now like 7-5, I may even be able to accept that if we win all but one of our remaining games and show steady upward trajectory and improvement. Because if we're on a plan that's going to make us better year after year, we will get to the national championship. What I'm seeing right now, though, is stagnation, not progress. And what I'm seeing is regression, not progression.
Yeah. So let me deal with a question from Gixxer Squid. Matt, what's your opinion on Lincoln Riley's post-game feedback? Lacks fire. Gixxer Squid, you might have heard me with Mark Rogers in the past, and as you can tell, Mark still is having spending time with family, so he should be back next week. But I've had conversations with Mark, and Mark, in the 1970s loved the Tom Landry Dallas Cowboys. And Tom Landry is kind of the poster child for the emotionless, stoic head coach. And obviously the Cowboys were absolutely amazing for nearly 20 years. But then when they began to slide in the 1980s, people would say, well, he's not emotional. Tom Landry's not emotional. He doesn't care. Where's the passion? And that gets to, Gixxer, don't judge a book by its cover. I don't care if a coach is stoic. I don't care if he's fiery. What I care about is that he gets his players to play consistent football. And I think where Lincoln Riley needs to change, as I alluded to earlier, don't be so defensive. Let the media watch your practices. Like, again, like this is not, the Kremlin, right? You do not need to preserve state secrets at all costs. You can be open to the world, buddy. You can relax, all right? Let everybody see your operation. Like, really, what do you have to hide? Why do you have to micromanage the press? Forge better relationships with the media, for one thing. But secondly, like, this is not the Cold War, right? Get a grip. You need to be open, you need to be relaxed, and that vibe needs to then translate into your locker room where players are looser. These players are not loose. These players, clearly, they get nervous, they get very tight late in fourth quarters. And again, that's an extension of your head coach. And there is a guy on campus at USC. He's going to be teaching courses at USC. His name is Pete Carroll. All right? Maybe consult him. Maybe bring him in for a little pep talk. I maybe he's already done it, but I kind of doubt it. And I know that Pete wouldn't intervene by himself. Like, he's not going to step into this situation. But Lincoln Riley needs to have Pete Carroll, invite him into the program, create a fresh, new kind of energy. And I'm not saying that Pete Carroll should coach this team. I'm not saying Pete Carroll should be hired as defensive coordinator. I am saying that Lincoln Riley, you have this resource. He is there. He is involved with the university. Okay? Use him. Tap into him. And maybe that's happening behind the scenes, but I kind of doubt it. Because you'd think that word would kind of get out if there was a little bit of collaboration, if there was more communication between Lincoln and Pete. Just, use what's there, right? I think Lincoln Riley needs to rethink. And again, this is where Jen Cohen can come into play. Jen should be telling Lincoln, hey, it is your show, but at some point, if your show continues to not work, you need to make adjustments. And like he did that with the defensive hires. So Jen Cohen deserves credit for making sure to hire an elite defensive staff. I think the next piece of the puzzle is hiring a new offensive line coach. But I think the piece of how Lincoln Riley handles his day-to-day business, like Jen Cohen shouldn't necessarily demand that Lincoln Riley change his methods, but she should at least be posing that question. Hey, Lincoln, why be so secretive? Why not loosen up? I would also say, you have Lindsey Gottlieb there. Lindsey Gottlieb, it was really interesting. Not last year, but the year before, when USC women's basketball got to the first round of the NCAA tournament, lost in the first round. But like you could see it, the program, was on the way up, and that Gottlieb was beginning to really put it together for the program. She gave a very interesting answer after USC lost in the 2023 NCAA tournament. She said, in response to a question that a freelance reporter asked, but it was a freelance reporter I talked to before the game. I said, if you get a chance to talk to Gottlieb, ask her this. And the question was, do you coach effort? And is there a methodology in terms of how you coach effort, how you coach intensity, how you coach the right mentality? And without giving away, the exact details, Gottlieb said, yes. As a head coach, there is definitely a science, a method to coaching effort. How to go about your business as an athlete, how to go about attacking the game that you're playing, how to look at the opponent you're playing. There is an art to this. And of course, some of this is natural and inherent to the athlete. There has to be an inherent desire to want to be great. But then once you kind of see that raw material, yes, there is a way to coach athletes in ways that bring out the most effort possible, an effort which is concentrated, an effort which is focused on the task. So I share that answer from Lindsey Gottlieb because that is a very wise coach. And one could make the argument that, well, you have national championship volleyball and water polo programs at USC, so those coaches are great. But like in terms of a revenue sport, a prominent national revenue sport, Lindsey Gottlieb is the best coach that USC has. Lincoln Riley should be tapping into that. Lincoln Riley should be asking Lindsey Gottlieb, not how to run my football program, but hey, what's your secret in terms of coaching effort? What's your secret in terms of bringing out the most in athletes? So you have Pete Carroll, you have Lindsey Gottlieb, and you do have your national champion volleyball and water polo coaches. Like Lincoln Riley should be consulting these people. I'm not saying it's like the secret, like it's the central thing. The central thing is that offensive line recruiting and replacing Josh Henson, and then also being better in the portal. Those are the two main things. So let's be clear about that. But Lincoln Riley, behind the scenes, when we look at this team, which is empirically not mentally tough in fourth quarters, Lincoln Riley should be consulting the other sources of wisdom within USC athletics. There are a lot of very wise, very accomplished people, not just in terms of X's and O's, but they have a high emotional IQ. And Lincoln Riley is striking out right now. And when you're striking out the way he is, you need to get input from other people. And Lincoln Riley doesn't strike me as a guy who's doing that he's closed in, defensive, walling off his program like Cold War Politburo, in Russia, all right? Instead of, being open to suggestions, open to advice, open to new voices. There's something there. There is something of merit that Lincoln Riley is not availing himself of, and that is an important point to make, Adam.
I completely agree with you. And look, it gives me no pleasure whatsoever to criticize Lincoln Riley, to criticize Jen Cohen, to criticize Carol Folt. But I am a USC graduate, and I love my program, and I don't like the mediocrity that's plagued it recently. And I'm going to call out what I think are the problems, and I'll explain why. Carol Folt, several years ago, had a chance to hire Urban Meyer. And she didn't want to hire Urban Meyer because of the quote-unquote baggage it might bring. Okay, so she did what? She stuck with Clay Helton. Bad decision. Lincoln Riley comes here, and he continues the same philosophy he had at OU. Great offense with Caleb Williams, and a mediocre defense, and we wind up losing to the likes of Tulane, and last year losing to teams like Washington, who was in the national title game, 52-42, and giving up 40-plus points per game. And then this year with Riley, what did I see in the post-game press conference? Well, I'll tell you what I wanted to see. I wanted him to say, this is completely unacceptable, and every position is up for grabs now because we are a winning program, and this is embarrassing. I don't want to hear the coach speak. Or like what Clay Helton used to say, we're going to clean things up. It's all nonsense. I want coaches, and I want a president and an AD who wants one standard and one standard only, winning a national championship. And from Folt's decision to keep Helton to Riley's mediocre coaching and tentative coaching, as we've seen this year, I don't see that happening. So it might be a time for some fundamental changes.